Hey, good morning.
Hello.
Hey, everyone. All right, I'm gonna get started. Oh, there's Brendan. Hey, Brendan.
Okay, so I have to drop in probably 10 minutes, but then I can be back on the half hour. I did wanna chat a little bit about what Microsoft was talking about last week. Um, yeah, so I'll probably be back at 11:30 to talk about that.
You have till 11:10, or you gotta leave right now?
I have until 11:15.
Oh, 15. Okay.
So
I
yeah,
mean, you can talk about that right now if you want before you head out.
okay, yeah. Um, should I start now, or do we? Okay. So I met with Alex, Robbie. Sorry, my talking is a bit breaking up because my shingles is fucking with me. Um, and a few others that didn't really talk on the call, but we it ended up being their architecture is they're creating build S bombs and they're associating the S bombs with a particular image, right? And then they have these mirrors that mirror an image across multiple registries. So um, the the daemon that the service that kind of does the mirroring is difficult for them to plug in something there. Um, and so they're kind of leaning towards a solution where they are using the OCI collector to be able to um, get some more information about this, right? So I think that there's two things. One of them was like, um, do we want the interface to do it be the collector or certifier or a CLI, which is then called in a certain place, right? And then the second design decision was like, how do we want to communicate this information? Um, so there is the image association information, or it can be a SBOM association information, right? So we talked about two options. One being creating an SBOM reference attestation, which is the attestation type that Marco recently upstreamed, to say that this SBOM that was produced is from this particular image, and then associate both the artifact hash and the image URI with it, which would be the package URL. Or the alternative is to either have another predicate or just like the empty predicate type to say like this is a subject. Just to say like there's association that the OCI registry where it goes to crawl the registry. It says that I detected that I found this image, and with this hash, and so-called it is that similar to like a concept that that at Google we have something called ground truth, which is to say like we're going to go to the registry and figure out what actually is in the registry and write it down. So that would be kind of like an attestation in that sense, and then that attestation would be able to then make a linkage that says that this particular image has this particular hash and was found in this registry. So that way we will have the is occurrence association with the image URI, and then we could find the SBOM from there. So besides having attestation, we talked about having a certifier, right? Where it's like, oh, can we just use the certifier to just create these predicates? And so that I think I I don't know what the best thing to do there is. I don't know whether like we want to create an attestation or is it just create a certifier that can talk directly to the backend.
So the certifier would talk to the OCI registry, pull down the information, and try to correlate between stuff.
Yeah, so
To
it
an
would be like the OCI registry collector acting as a certifier, right? So like to me, the difference
Yeah.
between collector and certifier is like you either query the graph and then you wait, no, OSV collector, the certifier still ingest documents, right? Oh no, it doesn't.
Certifier ingest documents, yes. I mean, it creates its own documents to ingest.
Right. Um,
So it creates attestations, the certifiers.
yeah. So no matter what, we still need the attestations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you generate the attestation, like you said, the SPOM association attestation. And then you that's what you read in for the ingestion.
but in this case, it wouldn't be a S1 association, right? It would just say like, I know that this URI points to this hash at this point in time. So in this case, like the OCI registry collector is only collecting attestations that are within the OCI registry, and then dumping them into the ingester.
Hmm.
We, I think the proposal was along the lines of like the OCI registry collector would also um, generate a attestation.
Which there is no attestation type for currently, right? There's something we would create.
Yeah, and I think the conversation we touched a little bit deeper on that, which is to say whether like do we need an in total attestation? Can we just create like a GUAC predicate type initially to do that and then upstream it
Hmm.
if we have to?
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
we've done
yeah,
that in the past. So
something to just say like we found this thing in this registry with this hash and this thing.
and then what would you use to store that in the database? As metadata or something?
Has
or is
metadata.
occurrence, or is
It's
occurrence,
occurrence.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
occurrence and has metadata, right? So you one thing you say that is this URI points to this hash, and the hash metadata will say that this was found via this artifact, and this URI were found from crawling the registry.
And it would just be, it would be at the occurrence, right? The occurrence would have that metadata, or what would have that metadata?
Uh, I don't know. I see that as a label predicate, but um,
Yeah.
maybe a label predicate on. Well, I think in the scope of like other ecosystems, it can just point to a single artifact or whether an artifact or a package. In this case, it points to both things at the same time. Um, but basically, I think that is that answers a separate question that they're having, which is like, I want to know what are the things I need to care about, right? So if I have a bunch of things that I put into GUAC, like how many of these container images are dependencies versus how many of them are actually like things that I'm shipping to customers. So that's when that piece of metadata is helpful as well. So I think it could be separately attached to um, to both the package identifier as well as the artifact identifier as well.
But isn't it a combination of the two?
So the is
That,
occurrence will be the combination, I think.
but having the metadata on the package itself or the artifact itself doesn't tell you which occurrence is associated with, does it?
It doesn't. So you would like for them if we define a particular image, and they would say like, let me find all occurrences of this artifact that has this
Okay.
SBOM. Yeah. Or like if I find a URI, say give me all occurrences of this, all artifact occurrences of this, and give me all SBOMs associated with them.
So what difference does it make then if it has metadata or not?
Has metadata is a separate thing from SBOMs that tells me like what's in my actual registry that's important to me. So if you have something like, oh, we ship everything, these are all customer facing images.
Okay, I
Um,
see.
So there's a secondary use case, the
Okay.
so-called, at least, internally at Google, we call ground truth. Sorry, I gotta jump now, and then I'll be back. I'll be back later.
All right. Sounds good. Yep.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for them to be separate, for the metadata to be applied separately to the package and the artifact, because they do answer different questions. There can be like a software package can be in a certain, say, registry independent of which specific artifact it is, and that for example, if we do add some type of a like garbage collection, in case an artifact is no longer in a registry, but the package is, we wouldn't be able to remove that node if it were applied to both.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems fairly simple to make our own predicate for now. to combine all this information together for the URI that points to the hash and ingesting the currents and stuff like that and the metadata.
Do you mean a predicate in the graph, in the ontology,
No,
or ingestion?
just the on ingestion for the ingestion GUAC
Yeah.
specific one. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, do you mean in toto predicate?
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have to be, or it could be
Okay.
an internal GUAC
Sure.
in toto predicate, right? That's not published out to the Intoto stations yet.
Yeah.
Then we can upstream it if people find it useful. But it could just be something that's used internally in GUAC kind of thing.
That might be easiest, yeah. I would lean against doing an empty predicate.
What do you mean by empty?
We're not providing a predicate. Like not providing a predicate type.
Yeah, I think we follow the in total attestations format. It's just that it's just internal, right? It's just not published out, right? We follow the same standards and all that kind of stuff, right? It's not something that we go create our own. It's just that we just don't upstream it at this point.
Yeah,
Question?
yeah. No, I was gonna say, like, I know in the past one of the things we had talked about was like, essentially being able to ingest arbitrary,
Yeah.
predicates and just like be able to do something with it. Whether it's like we can pull in arbitrary predicates and just separate them by key value in some way and just have that and just like, but we don't do anything extra. Or I mean, I know one of the other ones was potentially having some sort of mapping, like some sort of external process where you could like have like a config file to, to say, because like without having to recompile GUAC is the point I'm trying to make here of being able to say, this predicate has these values which map into the internal GUAC data model. But again, like that second bit, that's obviously a larger thing. But the first one, I think, doesn't seem too bad. Obviously, as long as certain like things are taken into account of like, we probably want to avoid potential attacks of like somebody throwing an in toto predicate that is just like a million nested things, unless we specifically say we actually only do one level, or like we'll have to make some decisions there. But
yeah, so I was gonna say like if you want to make it more extendable, right, in the future, we don't want to keep, if you want to create generic predicates, it might be easier just to store them all into as metadata or something as a key value. Yeah, but okay. All right, so let's wait for him to come back and see how you want to move forward with that. Okay, so for the agenda, was there anything else from the team? Anything else we want to talk about?
So I wanted to see. So we started before the holidays talks about V2 and the Trustify effort from Red Hat, and so I just want to see how to, continue with all that, when to restart things. you know,
Yeah.
is it still an interesting topic? And yeah.
Yes, yeah, 100%. I think if there's nothing else, we can talk about that. I think the one other one was, did we talk about that already? Let me see. I think we did. I think we talked about it at the community meeting, where it's like, when are we ready to call the 1.0 release and draw a line in the sand for some of the stuff? So was there anything else that we were missing? Saying like, hey, we're getting, or make like a checklist, like, hey, these are the things that are left over from 1.0. And then this way, at the same time, we can work with, Dijon, and we can start designing out the 2.0 kind of stuff. How you kind of move forward with it. I know we had this original here punch list, 1.0 punch list. Was there anything you were missing? I can share my screen, but not sharing. Let's see. Okay. So I believe the deps.dev stuff is done. Mihai, do you know? I think we reviewed the last PR on that, or is it still? Because we did the deps.dev on ingestion. I think it's all done now.
I think it's mostly done, yeah.
C sub, we're removing it out. So you can remove the C sub out. I think that's still kind of left to do. It's like removing the C sub from the Docker compose and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's not done yet.
Remove the deps.dev collector.
Yeah.
I think this will cause updates to the demos. The patch planning, I believe. So otherwise, we'll get all the other information. So, okay. Let me see what else was there. Oh, we had to clean out all the old non-supported backends. I think we just get rid of them all, right?
Yeah, we definitely should.
Backends. Do we want to keep supporting key value? That's another thing.
I think that's useful for testing, so probably. But
keep
for
it up to
example,
date with.
Neo4j.
Okay. Like, do we actually test in key value though? Because I feel like I personally do not test with key value anymore. I always test with Postgres.
I don't know. If we don't use it, then yeah, we can also delete it.
What does the other team think about that? Team members, containers. Hey, Brandon. So real quick, just to catch you up, like we're just figuring out what the 1.0 is, like what's left in terms of the 1.0, so that we can draw a line in the sand, so we can start continue working with Dijon for the 2.0. So I'm just going through and writing down, like, I think all the deps.dev stuff is done. I think you finished all those PRs. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. So you can remove the C sub, remove the deps.dev collector, right, from the Docker Compose. Update any of the demos that rely on some of the deps.dev data. I think like the patch planning has some intermediate packages that it calls out based on the dev data. Then you gotta remove some of that, and then clean out all non-supported backends.
What's the last one again? Okay, yeah, not supported backends.
So the question here was, should we get rid of the key value backend also? Does anybody actually use a key value backend? Because I personally do not use a key value backend when I test. So is that something we want to get rid of or not? Because I mostly, if we're developing, I'm using the Postgres to test against and validate all the functionality.
I mean, I still feel like I'm kind of curious of what Ben thinks about this, because I still feel like one of the first workflows that people will be doing is just running the demos, right, which will still use the key value, unless there's an easy way to have that, like GUAC GQL just set up the Postgres easily.
Oh, we do have the Docker compose Postgres. Right. There's instructions to set up the Postgres backend also.
So I guess that's the question, right? Would we say like the deployment is the 1.0 and then with all these features, and then get rid of the key value and not ask anyone to call that GUAC GQL thing? Like, would that
a GUAC GQL still work? What do you mean?
GUAC GQL will default to key value backend, right?
Not if you run it with the Postgres running in the background, right? With the Docker compose.
Right. I think the question is like, is there a world in which we ask a user to just I think this was going to Ben's question of like, oh, we want it to be as a simple flow where users can try out GUAC, right? And maybe that's just GUAC 1. And then we should no longer get people to just run GUAC GQL anymore, which I think makes sense. Marco?
We also use the key value backend right now for testing, to test the REST API. We start I think a key value backend for maybe for every test. And then this way we can populate it with data, and data between tests don't affect each other. I'm not sure if that would like a similar approach would scale with the Postgres.
Do you mean the integration test, or which test are you referring to?
Yeah, these are integration tests. These are integration tests. I mean, to test the REST API, instead of mocking the the GraphQL server, we actually start it.
Okay.
We start a backend for it and put data in.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if it's being used for testing and all this kind of stuff, I think we keep it then.
I guess we can keep it, but we say like it's not supported for production for 1.0.
I mean, it was never meant for production anyways, right? We always tell it it's always for testing, right? It was always like, yeah, you can use it for testing and not for anything else. Ben, did you want to say something, or Mihai?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, what's the cost of keeping it, in terms of like how much effort is it to keep it? Because I do think if it's if the effort involved in maintaining it is more than the effort of retooling the demos and stuff like that, then it's probably not worthwhile for us, especially since we're looking at a re-architecture for 2.0 anyway.
Yeah, I think we keep it in that case. Yeah, only downside currently is that if you make any updates, we have to, update both key value and to this both keep them up to date. That's the only negative. But
I think the hope is that when we move to the 2.0, then that will just be a clean slate, so we wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's keep it. And then remove Orango also, right? Okay. All right. So Orango, Neo4j, and Neptune. We'll get rid of them. Okay. All right. Anything else that's left over on this list?
For whoever's gonna do that, can I suggest that we copy the code somewhere, or like archive it somewhere?
I mean, we can give a tag, and we can always refer back to the tag.
Yeah. I think tag sounds like a good.
Yeah, maybe we can always go back commits and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, but it's harder to find the commit. Whereas with the tag, at least you know where to go.
Yeah, like a tag like archive backends or something like that.
Okay. All right. Oh, and then related to the that internal predicate, Brendan, for that SBOM and URI or hash and URI kind of a correlation. And then Mike brought up the point that we were talking about the predicate dictionary when we first started all this, right? How do we make it generic so that it doesn't, we don't have to keep recompiling or keep adding new predicate supports, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not sure if you want to handle as part of this or it just changes as part of 2.0, but maybe for now it's okay. But like maybe you store it as a key value, all the predicate information as a key value, and you figure out how, or that the user or the application kind of figures out, the client kind of figures out, okay, what does it want to do with this information?
So I'm not sure that I fully understand that, but how does it relate to, like, at some point I think I created the ingest predicates document as like a debug tool. Are we saying that like we have a predicate with just that body, or are you saying something different?
No, I'm just saying, how do we like if a new predicate comes out tomorrow kind of thing, and you want support for it in GUAC, how do you make it generic enough so that we store it into GUAC, and then how do we store it into GUAC, and then at the same time, how does a client use that information where they need to? The predicate dictionary stuff, basically, right? That's the thing. I thought we ought to handle it right now.
Right. It would basically like translate but I think that would be like, in my mind, it was like you update the ingester, and the ingester would translate that predicate into the ontology, and add it into GUAC, right? And so like if you get the predicates that you don't recognize, we would have to store them somewhere.
Yeah, that's the question. Where do we store them?
So I think Marco may have some ideas for this because he's been working on we've been looking at something similar inside. But to me, it's a pub sub, right? That we have that file thing. If something's not recognizable, like unknown predicate, we can at some point like reprocess them. So maybe we have a queue of like I tried to process this blob, it was unsuccessful. I send it to kind of like, if it's like in total predicate that's just not recognizable, then I send it to some archive pubs up, which will, or I just configure the pubs up to say like keep that for I don't know, 3 months or 6 months. And hopefully by then.
What? Yeah. So we update GUAC in order to read it in, or how does that work then?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to update the ingester to read it in. But so I think the problem that the problem that Graphias had was that they had to change the data model every time they created a new predicate, because their data model was the predicate itself. And so whenever there was a new predicate, they were to create a new table, and then they were to change the schema, and the database update was the problem that they couldn't change.
I see.
We don't have this because we have, assuming our ontology is good, we wouldn't have to change it.
Where would you store it then? As metadata or something?
Oh, you mean like the unrecognizable predicates?
No, like let's say we do want to support it in the future, right? Without changing the data model around how do you store this information?
Yeah. I think has metadata until we decide to launch a new version of the ontology.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Is there anything else we want to talk about?
That's not for
on
1.0, right? This is just like,
no, this is not. Yeah, this is not for 1.0. Yeah.
I don't know whether Marco, you had any thoughts on that, like failure to process pipeline thing, because I know you've been kind of looking at that for Zylo.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, we found that reprocessing evidence was tricky. Something that might make it easier here is that it might not be necessary. If somebody's running an instance of GUAC and they're getting unknown attestations, then that probably means they don't care about it. And when they do start caring about it, I think it's reasonable to have the restriction that only the new attestations that you get once you upgrade your GUAC will be ingested correctly. But then again, this like feature also does make sense to support reprocessing to fix mistakes in code. But I don't know if it's like critical to expanding the support, to having a more flexible support for predicates. Also, in response to where to store them, aren't they already stored in like the blob store that you can configure? And
yes,
and so, and even if they're not handled like first class, there could still be like a record of them in GUAC, like with a has metadata, as you mentioned, or something like that. So like that would be that could just be the storage. The record of like seeing an unknown attestation is in GUAC and it's stored in the blob store.
but how does that help you when you want to use it for some kind of a policy check then, right? If you can't read the predicate or understand it, it's not really helping you. Because it just becomes an attestation store at that point, right? You're not really doing anything with the information.
Well, I guess that goes back to what I was saying about how if you care about an attestation, then Like you should use a GUAC that supports it. But if that's and I guess another solution there is also the what Michael mentioned, having some config file where that can parse that configures parsing of predicates to like a has metadata.
Yeah. All right.
Does that answer your question?
Go ahead.
Maybe I didn't understand it.
No, it does. Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's table that conversation for now. I guess we're not doing it for 1.0, so it's probably for part of 2.0. So, all right. How do we want to run for the 2.0? You know, because I think this is the first time we're talking about it this year. Is that right, Dijon? I think we talked about it since we started, right? Because the holiday, and I think you were out a little.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
we don't have to proceed today. I just wanted to like see what's the plan. Maybe plan for the next week to
Yeah, I think so.
To do an update, maybe database schema where we are, things like that, and just try to figure out, because people on our side would like to see some progress on us making some community about it. So just to like maybe see where we are, how's it fitting, and maybe come up everybody with like a long-term plan, how we want to deliver all that and figure things out. Brennan?
Yeah, I'd be curious if like I know this is like a longer discussion and stuff, but I'd be curious if like if you have any thoughts, or you can give us kind of an idea on what would be your ideal interaction, if in the ideal world, what would GUAC 2.0 give you and how you would use it. I feel like that may be a good starting point for us to kind of start from, at least architecturally.
Yeah, I think what I heard from people, on my team is that like our ideal solution is for us to donate everything that we're working on as a starting point from 2.0. In my personal opinion, I think that would be maybe hard thing to do, because like there's already a lot of work done in GUAC community. People have different use cases. I'm really not sure if it's fitting that purpose, but I guess like we would like to like build everything we are building to build it as GUAC, right? That would be like ideal world from my top management, as far as I know, right? Does that make sense? I mean, and I've been in open source communities for a long time. I know that's not how world works, right? So especially like in larger communities and in sub communities like this. But like, well, yeah, anything we can do to contribute to what we're working on and to figure out how to do that, that's good. I mean, if you at least go through this exercise and see how it fits or not fit, maybe we end up, this is just my loud thinking, right? Maybe we said like, okay, what we're doing in Trustify maybe is a complementary project to GUAC, right? Maybe we do something like that. But I would really like to like dig deeper into all this with you guys, see where everybody is standing around this, and define something that we can go and say like, okay, this can work, this can't work, and maybe we figure out, is it the database layer, is it the whole code, is it the database, is it the API compatibility, I mean, if we, or maybe we find another project in OpenSSF that's like GUAC compatible for other things? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I was curious, kind of as exactly as what you said, right? I think there is some product strategy, and whether that's like a Kubernetes style where like, oh, we're just gonna help you run a managed service, versus we have the infrastructure, but we're gonna provide like additional like we wanted to sell like more threat intelligence and other things, right? Or like an integration story. I think that then we would have to make particular decisions to say like, okay, we're not gonna go compete with you or like doing some of those things. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, from our point of view, everything is already done in open source. It's just a thing. There will be no, open core or anything like that. So everything will be and will stay open source as it is, right? Art, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my that makes sense. I think my question was, okay, so if we did want to do the 2.0, yeah, I mean, we want to do the 2.0 for GUAC, do we start that as like a greenfield project, or do we modify the existing code base? I feel like we should just keep it as it is, keep GUAC as it is right now, and then create a new project within the GUAC-sec organization, right? Where we start like, okay, take some of the pieces from the existing code base that works, that we want to keep, and then kind of start kind of from scratch, and pull in some stuff from justification. I'm not sure how we're going to go about that, but it seems like modifying the existing code base might get messy, right? Especially if there's like bugs or something else we want to like support as we're kind of developing a 2.0, we want to have the code base so that we can support stuff and all that kind of stuff, right? Making some bug fixes for 1.0 after the 1.0 releases.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think what Jeff has done with like the software identifier piece as well for the clearly defined stuff, right? I think that's a good pattern, right? Where we recognize, okay, like our parsers are good. Let's pull them out, and let's use them separately and not get tangled up with the rest of the book.
Cool. Then maybe I prepare a little bit more deep dive into Trustify for the next meeting. 15-20 minutes of like a database scheme. I think, Brandon, you were interested in that last time, and how things stand there. And yeah.
Oh,
and then
quick question on that, Dijon. Does justification have support for attestations and stuff like that, like your schema currently, or?
Not at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
So what that some of the things that are missing. So at the moment we are mostly focused on the
Vulnerabilities and
management and vulnerabilities. Yeah. So there's no license support as well. I know people asking for the a scorecards and attestations will be coming, but they are not in the in the project at the moment.
Okay, because that would be interested to like working together to figure out, okay, how do we expand the schema to support that in a good way, all that kind of stuff, right? For like the 2.0.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're still using Postgres directly, right? You're not using Ent. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's a Rust code base.
Yeah.
We use CORB, which is like a Ent for Rust, but it's completely focused on Postgres at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
And
was there a question? Sorry.
As I showed the last time, we even go to that level that you can basically what you discussed with the key value store. So we can run Postgres in Rust process basically. So that's our version for testing and like we call it PM, product manager mode, so that they can easily like run things without needing to even use Docker, right? So yeah, but yeah, I think abstraction is Postgres.
All right, so yeah, next week is FOSDEM. I'm not sure, Dijon, if you're going to be attending FOSDEM at all.
No, not this time.
Okay, yeah, so I think Brendan, Mihai, I'm not sure if you're going.
I don't know whether I'll make it anymore, given my my thing. Yeah.
Okay, Marco, I think you're going. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, Marco, I think Jeff is going and Mike is going. Right. So okay, so a lot of people. So
yeah, so
yeah,
so
we can.
then in 2 weeks time, huh?
Seems like a yeah, unless because I'm going to be here, Mihai's going to be here, and maybe Brendan's going to be here. So if we want to meet up and start doing some preliminary talks, we can still get together next week and do that. But
sure, and we can record for folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's not skip it. I think we can keep it and get some progress. And then I think once we're a little bit further down the planning phase, I think we can start like, okay, let's start assigning some tasks and actually like let's start putting, pen to paper, like actually doing some work and start getting some stuff done. Okay, that sounds good. And then yeah, I just had to create some issues on GitHub for the 1.0 stuff, right? Cleaning out some of the stuff and just getting all that stuff over the line. It shouldn't be too bad. All right. I think we can call it a little bit early, 7 minutes. Anything else? Good. All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.